Are you getting the most out of Sage 200? Do you want a regular feed bursting with top tips, hints, and advice for you to streamline Sage 200? Then you've come to the right place. The Sage 200 Buzz Podcast, making the most out of everything Sage 200.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Sage 200 Buzz Podcast. My name is Hannah Monroe and joining me on today's podcast is my co-host with the most, Mr. Mark Armstrong.
Morning.
Morning. So for those of you that didn't know this, but this is actually the second time we've recorded this podcast.
It is, yeah. Hannah decided not to record the first one.
Well, I just thought you might want some practice, Mark.
Well, she tells me this, yeah.
So we're recording again. So apologies if we're not as good as the first time round. We had it pretty nailed.
We've practiced now. We've practiced, haven't we? So it should be better. In theory, this will be better.
So a couple of changes. So Mark and I have been having a chat about this, the podcast and how it works. And one of the things we've sort of decided is to have themes. Mm-hmm. So the way that's going to work is because, we've covered a lot of surface level information, but what we haven't really done is gone into the detail of different areas. And to be honest, that's where the exciting and the interesting stuff happens. It's actually when you get to grips with the in-depth of different areas within Sage. So in order to make this as useful as possible, we're going to have sort of different themes running through. So this month's theme is actually payment processing in particular. Mm-hmm. And this particular podcast, we're going to have a look at an intro to payment processing. So we're going to cover what it is, what you need to have set up, and some of the different things to think about when you're setting up payment processing. We're then going to have a look at in particular in the add-on section, we're going to have a look at Spindle and Document capture. Yeah. And we're going to make it specific to payment processing. So we're going to have an in-depth look at how Spindle and Document capture can actually help with your payment processing.
Yeah.
So, let's get started. So take two, hey Mark? So round two. So tell me, what is payment processing? You should have this down pat now.
I've got my script. So payment processing is a function within 200 that basically allows you to pay invoices.
Nice.
That's the podcast.
We're stopping there.
That's it. That will do. So what it does, it allows you to... It will run through, you can either do it manually or you can use a function called generate suggested payments, which I'll have a look at later. But basically it can run through itself and it can find invoices that are due to be paid and it will allow you to pay them all at once. You can do that either for multiple suppliers within a payment group, which we'll go through later, or we can do that for just a single supplier that's got a lot of invoices, or you can actually just do it, rather than manually entering your payment if you feel the need to.
Okay, so in terms of payment process, so what does it actually do?
So what it does is it will find the invoices that are outstanding. It will then, when you actually generate the payments, which is the very last step of payment processing, it will generate all the payments that are necessary. It will post them to the respective supplier accounts for the same value as each of those invoices. And what it will do is it will allocate those payments against the invoices. What that basically means, because if you think about it, sort of, if you had to do it manually, you've got to go through, you've got to find the outstanding invoices first yourself anyway. You've then got to enter a manual payment yourself and make sure that manual payment has things like the reference is going to be the same so you can reference it. The value's got to be exactly the same. And then once you're happy with that and it's been posted, you've then got to go and actually allocate it against the invoice. What the payment processing does is take care of all that for you in a sense. So it saves you having to do that manual sort of slog of going through and entering it on and then making sure all the values are the same. And if it's not, you've then got to reverse it out and then put it back on again. So,
and not forgetting that once you've done all that stuff in Sage, you've then got to add it into the banking as well.
Well, exactly. That's another thing. That's sort of at the end of when you do generate the payments, is it depending on whether or not you've got e-banking set up, which we'll go through, is it can actually produce an e-banking file for you. Now that e-banking file can then just be uploaded to your bank. So not only are you accounting for it in 200, you're actually doing the payments themselves, so suppliers will be paid. They
tend to like that, don't they?
They do. They tend to get a little bit annoyed sometimes when they don't get paid, funnily enough.
Weird, that,
it's strange.
It's
strange.
Very strange, yeah. Okay, so that's a brief overview for take two, the second time.
I think that was better than the first time.
Yeah, actually, I think you've improved.
Yeah.
You've taken it to another level.
That's it.
So that's an intro to what payment processing processing is. And one of the things I'll just add to that as well is obviously when people move from 50 to 200, one of the biggest shifts is that concept around processing. So Sage 50 is very much designed for small businesses. It's designed to do things one at a time, one off. Whereas 200 is very much process driven.
Yeah.
So it's once you get to that stage when actually you want to streamline and improve and sort of take the repetitive edge out of a lot of things you're doing. So, and that's why payment processing works in the way it does. It takes a bit of getting used to for a lot of people.
Yeah, it does. And there is, and we'll go through this now, but the setup for it, you forget how much there really is to set up. And it's, you can't just one day decide, I want to turn it on and hit a button and it works. There's a lot of things that you've really got to set up, and it takes time. In the long run, if you think about it really, it makes the world a difference. Because if you've got, even if it's over, even if you do this once a month or something and you've got 100 or 150 invoices, and saves you the man hours it takes to actually put in to creating those manual payments and allocating them and all the rest of it and making sure they're actually correct,
Well, that's it. And the reality is when you do payment processing manually, there is so much opportunity for error.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you've got so many to do, all it takes is for just one sort of small thing to happen, and then it's not picked up on immediately, and you've got a knock-on effect later on. And it's, the payment processing, it just takes care of things for you a little bit better, I think, in terms of takes out the potential, even though there is potential user error because you can amend certain things, it takes out the less likely to be. And it takes out the manual process. And I think in the long run, if you tell your sort of purchase team that you don't have to go in and manually do these all over again, I'm sure they'll be more than happy and they'll have a smile on their face.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the, the big differences again with 250. And, with a lot of other small accounting packages, it's not just 50. But it's the fact that 200 is very much about control.
It really is, yeah.
Because at that sort of stage, once you start to move into 200, you want control, you want visibility, and you want to make sure that things are done correctly.
Exactly, yeah.
So, with a small business, you'd make one payment or you can just adjust it or tweak it, but when you're working with 200 and you're processing hundreds of payments,
yeah, exactly.
The controls have to be there.
Yeah.
And that's one, and again, we'll talk about this constantly through the podcast, but it's just a different approach.
Yeah, and I think the thing with 200 that I notice is that, obviously when you're making the switch from 50 to 200, going back to sort of the payment processing side of things, is that you're doing it for a reason, and that reason quite often is that now 50 doesn't quite have the necessary functionality that you need and things like that. 200 then, if you can get these processes and the payment processing sorted out now, even if now it doesn't seem like it's, you don't have a huge amount and you could do it manually, if you get it sorted out now and, your business is growing, in 2 years' time, 36 months' time or whatever, you've already got those in place now where you don't have to then go through and then search through thousands of suppliers to make sure the bank details are correct and set these payment groups up and decide what's what and what's where. It's set up for
really
the future. It's sort of future-proofing things so that that if your business is growing and it keeps growing, that if you set it up now, and it doesn't seem like it's necessary right now, but if it's set up, at least when it comes to a point when your purchase team turn around and say, I'm spending 50% of my time just doing this one thing, it's ready to go.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I do a lot of audits, so I'm going out to site, analysing how people are doing things, and it always amazes me how many bad habits people have gotten into. Yeah. So, because there's always this thing, and I say to this, is the initial sort of rush, you literally, when you first implement 200, everyone's just so worried about just getting in and doing their day-to-day job. Actually, they're not thinking big picture. So it's one of those things I tell, and that's why we actually, when we implement, we spend so much time on testing. I think we probably spend more time on testing than anyone else does.
I think so, yeah.
But because people need to be comfortable, otherwise we have this scenario, and it's happened, where and we could tell when people haven't tested, because on the day of go live they're so panicked about starting to enter data, and and they don't know the system, that actually they forget all of the good habits that we've talked to them about and we've said that they should get into, things like payment processing.
Exactly. You need to take that step back, I think, at times. Stop just thinking that you do this and it's the way to do it. There's always an opportunity where you can, especially if you are going to 200 or you've even got 200 at the minute and things are starting to get a bit sluggish, just take a step back and have a look through the system and think, well, maybe payment processing might free up some time. And just those small changes, things like that, can have a big impact over a long period of time. and it's just about taking that step back, overlooking everything that's going on and just thinking, well, they're spending too long doing that process. There's already inbuilt functionality for this that will save them so much time. Yeah. Things like this payment processing, when they kick into gear now, and you spend, even if it takes a week or two to set this up, and it takes a lot of man hours, for the next, for the future really now, you save everyone in the long run so much time.
Well, that's it. And I must admit, e-banking is one of those things that people just don't switch on initially.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I talk about with all my clients, and it's one of the things we go through, are you going to use e-banking? It's one of the questions when we do scoping, payment methods, how are you going to do it? So you're talking of payment methods. So we can go on forever about how people should implement 200. Mark and I have some very in-depth conversations. So sorry, we've got slightly sidetracked there. So back on track. So we've mentioned payment groups quite a few times. So what, let's go through in detail, what they are, how we set them up.
So payment groups are set up. Let's go through the first part, where payment groups are actually set up within the purchase ledger settings. And if you go into those purchase ledger settings, you'll see there's a tab there for payment groups. Take note that there is a tick box at the bottom there that says it's something on the lines of use the same payment method for all suppliers.
Yeah.
If you want to have different payment groups, which if you're using payment processing is recommended to do, just untick that, and it gives you access to, I think it's 8 different payment groups now.
Yeah.
What you'll do then is you'll notice, well, there's 3 columns. One's the number, one's the payment document, and one is the description. So your description is where you're going to have your different types of payment groups. So think of payment groups as a way of just grouping suppliers. Just that's how it's going to be, grouping suppliers dependent on how they are paid. And what you do then is you start to work on the payment documents once you're figuring out, what kind of different ways that the suppliers are going to be paid. Are they backs paid? Are they chaps? Are they, direct debits? Are they sending orders? Those kind of things. And what you can then do is it allows you to select a payment document that suits that type. You've got different types of payment documents where you've got check only, you've got remittance and check, you've got remittance paper, which allows you to print it out and send it to them. You've got remittance email, which allows you to just email it out for them. So there's all these different types of settings, and again, that's why we say it does take some time to set up, because you really have to think about, where do these suppliers kind of fall into and what do they require.
Yeah, so obviously payment groups are normally used for payment methods, like you said, sort of backs, direct debits and standing orders, that side of things. You mentioned CHAPS as well. So just a note to those of you that don't know, CHAPS is not an official supported way. So we can't get a CHAPS export at the moment. But the new Sage Payments Gateway that they're bringing out does give you the ability to pay foreign suppliers through the standard sort of payment processing. And at some point, once we've got the detail on that and how it works, we will be talking about it on the podcast. Yeah. But it also can be used for other reasons, if you have to group them in different payment runs. So some people stagger their payment runs, so they'll pay a suppliers monthly, but they'll do them in different batches for cash flow reasons. Yeah. So it can be used for that, or you can use that you can use analysis codes for that as well. Yeah. So one of the things obviously that you do need to set up, so if you want to filter who you're going to pay by an analysis code, i.e. payment run number, then you need to make sure that you've set up those analysis codes. And if you don't know how to set up analysis codes, we don't really have time to go through it in detail today. However, we do have an analysis code setup guide. Go onto our blog, have a look at that side of things. We've got so much information on analysis codes generally and different uses for them. Or listen to a previous podcast. I'm sure I've covered it. Different uses for payment for analysis codes. So if you're looking to do that, and we'll talk about probably on the next podcast how that comes into the process in terms of the actual detail of how payment processing works. But it's really important that you've got all this sort of set up before you get started. Yeah. Now, another thing with payment groups as well is the difference between update and summarize as well.
Yes.
It's when you're setting up payment groups, if you want a payment to hit the ledger, tick update. Yes. It's very, very rarely that anyone actually doesn't tick it, to be honest.
Yeah, because the point of, to me at least, the point of payment processing, again, is just to streamline things. It's to make things quicker. And if you can get the system to essentially do a job for you by using the update function, you'd use it, you know.
Yeah.
And there might be a reason why not to, but just make sure if you want it to hit the ledger and you want it to allocate against an invoice, make sure that is ticked.
Yeah.
Then the summarize one, which is different. The summarize, I believe it sort of groups together payments for a supplier if there's several, and it just posts
a single value. Yeah, so it posts a single value instead of like the individual detail. Exactly.
Now be careful with that in terms of reconciliations, because it's a nightmare to reconcile. In terms of batches through 200, it is hard to then on a transaction level, it becomes near impossible. In fact, it almost is impossible.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You just can't figure out which individual, because all it can take is, again, one or two transactions that are slightly off. And if you can't find that individual one because you've grouped 20 of them together, you've got no chance.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know. It's about summarizing transactions when it hits the ledger, and it's not. Reality is, unless you are processing, you know, huge volumes,
unless you've got thousands, and you're doing it because if you don't do it, your database is going to grow exponentially over the next 6 months.
Yeah,
there just isn't. I can't really think of another reason as to why to use it.
Well, to be honest, personally, unless obviously you want the values to hit the ledger in sort of summarized values, because that's how you reconcile.
Yeah,
that could be it, I guess, but. Anyway, so for those of you that want to use it, it is there.
Yeah.
But most of the time so the standard is update is ticked, summarise is not.
Yeah.
So a couple of things as well. So we talked about different things you've got to set up. So far we've talked about sort of setting up payment groups.
Yeah.
And those payment groups define what is produced.
Exactly,
It's also used to define how you group and how you pay suppliers, along with analysis codes. E-banking. So we are actually going to go into detail on this, aren't we?
We are a little bit on another podcast. I think we're going to go into it more. But essentially, just to note, if you do want to have e-banking working on payment processing, where I was saying about the payment documents, you'll notice that there's e-banking ones. Now you can have everything set up for e-banking in terms of the cash book and stuff. That needs to be selected on the payment group as well.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure, if you're going to use e-banking for those suppliers, make sure that they are in a payment group where electronic payments, remittance, or electronic payments is selected on the payment document.
Yeah, so that's producing the BACS file. So if you're going to want to, produce a BACS file to upload into your banking system, you need to have that turned on, and you need to select the right one for the payment group. So obviously we've mentioned a couple of things around sort of remittances, but it's really, really important that you check your remittances before you start using the payment processing.
Yeah.
So you've actually got two different types of remittances as standard within Sage. You've got your paper remittance and your email remittance. So your paper one is obviously designed so that you print it out on paper. It's, Sage can be quite logical sometimes.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite nice when it's like that. And obviously your email one is used for emailing. Awesome. So, but, in terms of sort of the default remittances that you get out, so the first thing I'd always say is you're probably going to want to add a few fields in.
Yeah.
So those of you that come from 15200, one of the things that I normally, because done enough implementations at this point to have some common sort of queries and questions. A lot of people want to add fields onto their remittances, and that that's why we have our preset remittance layouts, isn't it? Really,
yeah, exactly.
So we don't have to do it for every single client. So those normally we'd add in the invoice number, and the reference, and the reference, or the second reference, I should say, because the invoice number is normally the first reference. So that can be important. So it's worth checking what information that you're going to put on your remittances, because otherwise you can end up with a few more calls from suppliers than you actually want.
Yeah.
So they know what you're sort of sending payments against. So so just bearing that in mind, it's really important that you've got that information set up. A lot of people want to put their logos on, make them look a bit pretty. Some people want to, and you can actually use those two different layouts, not just for the method of how you send it, because technically you could actually email your paper layout as well, can't you?
Yeah.
But some people like to use them to have two completely different layouts.
Yeah, very differentiating it. You can have use sort of different logos on two different ones and things like that. So it just gives you that extra sort of level of customization in a sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with analysis codes, like traditional formatting. And for those of you that don't know, Sage has an inbuilt report designer. So that allows you to customize yourself all of these remittance layouts. If you have no idea what Report Designer is or how it works, jump onto our website. We have so many blogs on Report Designer, and in fact, we've actually got an e-course on Report Designer. It's a general introduction which literally goes through the toolbars, how to log in, sort of basic stuff. It's no good for any advanced users. We do training. Like training courses for Report Designer if you want to sort of get to grips with it. But as a general introduction, that will get you started and get you looking around. And you can do so much with it as well,
It is underutilized sometimes, I think, and just having you just need the basic knowledge, because sometimes things like Report Designer, it's trial and error.
Yeah.
You just need that basic knowledge. But yeah, definitely have a look on the website for some of the guides and the blogs that we've got, and again, the e-course as well is really good introduction for sort of new people that want to start using it.
Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing as well, sometimes people want to have different roles within the suppliers. So your remittances might go to the finance department, and the and everything else. The purchase orders goes to a different department. Don't forget that you can set up different roles for suppliers, just like you can with customers. So for those of you that don't know how to do that, if you go into Accounting System Manager, I think it's Settings, Customer and Supplier Roles, you can actually link particular documents with particular roles. Now, don't forget, obviously, that you're actually going to have to set up and link the contacts on your supplier to a particular role. So if you go onto the Contacts tab when you go to the Amend Supplier screen, you can do it from there, but that is also an option. So it's just to stop you sending the remittance to the wrong person. And again, it's the whole point of this is just to make sure that you're getting as few sort of queries from your suppliers as possible. Because that takes time from your team. So yeah, don't forget to set up your remittances and your roles. And there's quite a few things you actually have to set up on the suppliers themselves.
There is.
So we've mentioned payment groups. So you've got to set up a payment group. What else do you need to set up?
So make sure, because you've actually got a bank, is it a bank I think it is, tab on the supplier details. So within there, you've got to make sure that your sort codes, your account numbers, and all those kind of details in there are correct.
Yeah, really important.
A lot of the time, payment processing will kind of fall over if one or two aren't correct. It won't allow you to produce the file in a sense. It's a lot easier to do it all up front and to get your team into good habits than to try and have to do it for every supplier. Exactly. So, and what one thing as well will be sort of put into, we've pretty much put together is like a report of the month sort of thing. Which is basically a printout of all the suppliers and their bank details. So at the minute, you've actually got to go into each individual one and have a look and see is it got the sort code? Is the sort code right? Is the account number right? Which can be a bit of a pain. What this report allows you to do is just print it off and it'll list all them for you, so you can kind of go through and you can check off they're fine, and then just group together the ones that aren't and go through those ones. So we'll get that on there. If you're interested in getting that report, don't forget to sign up to our Sage 200 Buzz. We actually send out a free report of the month every month. We'll also try and put a link to it in the podcast as well, so that you can see that as well. So well worth having a look at the podcast notes and the blog that comes with the podcast. But yeah, easiest way is just get on our Sage 200 Buzz, and we normally send them out sort of fairly regularly. The other thing as well, you need to set up on your suppliers. We've mentioned account numbers and bank references as well. Don't forget those. All those different bits and pieces. You also need to select the payment groups, any analysis codes, and also just double check while you're there. You might as well check your contacts, make sure they've got a role, and also check your terms as well. So when you're entering invoices, it's automatically populating the right due date. Because that due date is what is actually used in the payment processing. Exactly. That's what Sage then uses to sort of figure out what you do need to pay.
So it's really important that all that sort of stuff is set up. Another thing that isn't actually used that often, but some suppliers use factor houses. So if one of your suppliers use factor houses, you can actually set them up. The way that works is it will pull the details through for the factor house. So you don't have to do it yourself, which is quite handy. You can set them up through the purchase ledger settings. and then, and actually go into the supplier and link an individual supplier to the Factor House as well.
Yeah.
So just so you know, that is then possible. And just to talk about, when you would send remittances to different people as well. Sometimes, again, it's with the remittances, sometimes if you're working with like a parent company as well, so you might buy stuff from, from Juice and Mould. Yeah. But actually, you need to send the remittance to Juice and Central, or Juice and UK. Don't forget that you can use those contacts for that kind of thing to actually specify where the remittances, etc., go. Yeah. So, well worth doing that. Okay, so that's pretty much everything we need to set up. So if you've got any questions or queries around this, we're going to be doing an FAQ on payment processing in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So please don't hesitate to send through your queries. You can email them through to info@itas.org.uk, or you can tweet us at itas solutions, #Sage200Buzz. Or you can contact us directly through the website, just in the contact us form, or leave us, or literally if you just dial onto Facebook. We're pretty much on every single social media platform there is. Haven't quite done Snapchat yet. Not planning on it, I don't think.
Well, you're not, I am.
Yeah, so Mark's heading up the Snapchat initiative. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And with if there's a particular topic you'd like us to focus on, we'd love to hear about that too. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the setup. So what is payment processing? What do I need to set up? In terms of sort of while we're talking about setup, let's have a look at Spindle and Document Capture. Yeah. So obviously, Spindle and Document Capture is our add-on of the week. Mm-hmm. And in particular, we're going to have a look at how it relates to payment processing. So for those of you that don't know, Spindle is a document management system in that it manages outgoing documents.
Exactly. Yeah.
Document Capture handles incoming documents and document storage. So the two are both produced by Dracer, and they work as a kit. And to be honest, the majority of clients we work with have a use for one or the other at some point in their Sage 200 journey. Yeah. So it's really, it's probably the biggest document management system for Sage 200.
I think I'd say so, yeah, definitely.
And the way it works, particularly for remittances, and the reason a lot of people use it for remittances is a couple of things. So firstly, it's all about filing. Yeah. Yeah. So you can automatically create sort of shared folders, either on a shared drive if you just want to use Spindle, where you can file remittances and give them specific names, and actually, so as you send it out, you produce a remittance, you click send, it will not only email it out, but it will also file a copy, or you can even send it to a different to an accounts at as well. So there's a couple of different ways you can use it for filing remittances. So it just saves you the hassle of printing it out and pay. It just amazes me how many finance departments are still filing like hard copies,
like actually printing it off and putting it in a filing cabinet, whereas you've got this machine in front of you that can literally
it's called a computer.
Yeah,
it's a new invention. It's only been around for a few
years. Yeah, I think Sage just runs off it, doesn't it, as well?
Really?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh no, didn't know that. And it's I know it's I must admit it's nice to have paper, but again the reality is that paper can get lost. It can be misplaced. If you take something out to search for it, it can disappear. Somebody walks off with it and sticks it on their desk, and God knows we've all had that happen to us.
Yeah, the searching bit for me is quite interesting in that if you file everything paper, if you want to go and search for it, you've got to sift through all these documents. I mean, within Windows, there's a search bar. And documents.
Well, document capture. So document capture is basically will allow you to store documents. So when you send out a remittance, it could automatically file it in Sage 200 against the supplier. Yeah. So you don't even have to see that, and it does loads more, and we'll talk about this as we go through. But you literally, when you're paying those, if you got an inquiry from a supplier, you can just jump onto the supplier tab in Sage 200 and actually find it. And it's also got a search functionality, so you can add like lots of different tags against different documents in document capture as well. So you can search against those tags. Yeah. So it's it's so much better in terms of finding and searching for information.
Yeah.
You know, and getting it quickly, because
Yeah,
we're all
that's
so
the
busy.
thing. That's the thing. And again, going back to like the streamlining things and like future-proofing stuff, is that if you can get payment processing and this and they work in tandem, you know, in the long run, when you do get all these calls when you have like a busy week, instead of you having to run through some filing cabinets or search on, you know, your own machine, you're sure you've saved it somewhere, but God knows where.
Yeah.
It's there, it's saved exactly where you need it, and it takes care of it all for you.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about it. And then all you've got to do is just make sure IT back it up.
Well,
and then
yeah.
you've got business continuity.
Exactly.
Amazing. And obviously the other thing as well is, you know, just the niceties around Spindle. Is it can put pretty backdrops and things on.
Yeah.
You know, better than the default report designer. No, default report designer can put logos on.
Yeah.
And it can put the old box on, but it's a little bit fiddly.
Yeah, you can do like watermarks and things like that, but we've always found it to be much easier to use Spindle, and it looks, I think anyway, a bit more professional through Spindle.
Yeah.
If you can get them set up through Spindle, it looks more professional, and that's to me anyway, is quite a big thing, especially if you're sending it out to like customers and things like that. If you get a professional looking document, it always gives quite a good impression, I think, to customers.
And you can attach different terms and conditions and things like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things as well is it can pull in analysis codes. So for instance, just as one example, if you needed to attach different terms and conditions or different documents to remittances dependent on an analysis code on the customer, Spindle will allow you to do that. The default report designer wouldn't. So it's very much dependent on, you know, what you're trying to achieve. The way I think about it, if you're doing anything manually, you need to be looking at ways to make it automated.
Yeah.
So that's a bit about Spindle and document capture specifically for remittances. So I hope that's helped, guys, and I hope that's sort of given you some insight. Slightly overrun this week. I think it's because we've done it for the second time round. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if you have any questions, queries, podcast ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Any feedback as well. You know, you can tell us to slow down, to shut up even. Perhaps maybe some more of Mark's bad jokes would be great as well.
Not bad jokes, how dare you?
So anyway, guys, have an amazing week, and we look forward to speaking to you next week on the Sage 200 Buzz podcast. Take care. Speak to you soon.
You have been listening to Sage 200 Buzz. To get in touch, visit itasolutions.co.uk or leave an email or a message using info@itas.org.uk. Also, you can find us on Twitter @ItasSolutions. Please leave feedback. Having difficulties with Sage 200? For friendly expert support, contact the Sage 200 specialists on 0845 139 1300.